Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to people who underestimated your worth and treated you like you did not belong. My name is Maya, I am 29 years old, and I work as a trauma nurse at Atlanta General Hospital, and have spent my entire life fighting for every single thing I have. I did not come from old money or inherit a trust fund, and built my career on grueling 12-hour shifts, sore feet, and a relentless, unapologetic drive to save lives. But to my fiancé Julian and his mother Vivian, none of that mattered. To them, I was just a girl from the wrong side of the tracks who managed to catch the eye of a wealth management vice president. The night everything shattered was Christmas Eve. The temperature in Atlanta had plummeted to a bitter 2 degrees, a rare and biting cold that chilled you straight to the bone. I had just finished a grueling trauma shift and was preparing to cover another emergency shift later that night. Julian was attending family's anticipated annual charity gala at the St. Regis Hotel. It was the absolute pinnacle of the social season for Atlanta's elite. I had originally been invited, or so I thought, until Vivian conveniently forgot to add my name to the final seating chart, claiming a caterer error. Julian had told me not to take it personally, saying it was just a tedious networking event anyway. But when I got back to our shared apartment, I noticed something sitting on the kitchen counter that made my heart drop. Julian's heart medication. He had a minor but unpredictable cardiac condition, and his doctor was strict about him taking his pills at 8 o'clock every evening. In his rush to get dressed in his custom tuxedo, he had left the bright orange prescription bottle behind. Knowing how stressful these high society events were for him, and how dangerous it could be to miss a dose, I did not hesitate, and grabbed the bottle, threw my heavy winter coat over my stained hospital scrubs, and drove straight to the St. Regis. The hotel looked like a fortress of extreme wealth illuminated against the dark winter sky. Luxury cars lined the valet entrance, and women in sparkling evening gowns stepped out, shivering elegantly as they hurried inside. I knew better than to walk through the grand front doors looking the way I did. My scrubs were wrinkled from a long trauma shift, my sneakers were stained with iodine, and my hair was pulled into a messy, practical bun. I did not want to embarrass Julian, so I walked around the massive building to the service entrance near the catering bays. The wind howled through the dark alleyway, cutting right through my thin coat, but I pulled out my phone and texted Julian that I was waiting out back with his medication. 10 minutes passed, my teeth began to chatter violently, I blew into my hands trying to keep them warm. Finally, the heavy metal door swung open, but it was not Julian who stepped out into the freezing alley. It was Vivian. She looked breathtakingly regal, in a floor-length emerald green gown, dripping in massive diamonds that caught the dim light of the alleyway security lamp. Her hair was styled perfectly, and her makeup was flawless. But the expression on her face was pure, unadulterated venom. She did not invite me inside to warm up, and stood squarely in the doorway, letting the heat from the hotel spill out while keeping me trapped in the cold. "What on earth are you doing here, Maya?" Vivian demanded, looking me up and down as if I were a stray dog that had wandered onto her pristine lawn, and held up the orange pill bottle, my hands shaking uncontrollably from the frigid air. Julian left his medication at the apartment. I know he needs to take it right now, so I rushed over after my shift to bring it to him. "Can you please give this to him?" Vivian snatched the bottle from my hand, but she did not step back inside. Instead, she crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes. Her cold gaze swept over my faded hospital scrubs and worn-out sneakers. The profound disgust radiating from her was palpable. "This outfit of yours," she sneered, shaking her head slowly. "Good Lord, I am so glad I managed to keep you off the guest list tonight. This is a high society donor gala, Maya. The board of directors is in there right now. People who actually matter, people with pedigree, legacy, and real power." I stood there, too stunned by her blatant cruelty to form a cohesive response. The cold wind whipped around us, but her words burned like acid. I was used to her passive-aggressive microaggressions about my background, but she had never been this openly vicious. You simply do not have the pedigree for our world, Vivian continued, her voice dripping with elitist arrogance. My son went to Morehouse, we come from generations of financial excellence, you went to a public state college, and you empty bedpans for a living. You do not fit the aesthetic tonight, and you never will. You are just a nurse, just a nurse. The words echoed violently in the freezing alley. I thought of the critically ill patients I had held as they took their last breaths, and thought of the terrified families I had comforted in their absolute darkest hours. I thought of the blood, sweat, and immense psychological toll I poured into my profession every single day. To Vivienne, all of that meant nothing, because I did not belong to her exclusive social clubs or wear designer labels. Before I could defend myself, the heavy metal door pushed open wider, and Julian stepped out. He looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo, casually holding a crystal glass of expensive champagne. For a split second, relief washed over me. My fiancé was here, he would put a stop to this, and would see me shivering in the cold, holding the medication I had driven across town to bring him, and he would stand up for me. Julian, I said, my voice trembling from the dropping temperature. I brought your pills, your mother was just telling me. Julian did not look at me with gratitude or love. He looked at me with profound embarrassment, and glanced back into the bright hotel hallway, to make sure none of his wealthy friends were watching, then stepped out and pulled the door, partially shut, behind him. Maya, why are you making a scene out here? He asked, his tone laced with heavy, condescending irritation. I stared at him in sheer disbelief. I am not making a scene, Julian. I brought you your medication because you forgot it, and came to the back door, so I would not embarrass you, and your mother just told me I am just a nurse who does not fit her aesthetic. I waited for him to turn to Vivian, and waited for him to demand respect for the woman he had explicitly asked to marry him. Instead, Julian let out a long dramatic sigh and ran a hand over his face. He looked at Vivian, then back at me, his eyes full of annoyance. Listen to yourself, Maya, Julian said, shaking his head. You are overreacting. My mother is just stressed about hosting this massive event. It is a very important night for our wealth management firm. Why do you always have to take everything so personally and make yourself the victim? The betrayal hit me harder and colder than the freezing wind. He was gaslighting me flawlessly, and was standing there in his expensive tuxedo, watching me freeze in my work scrubs, and explicitly telling me that I was the fundamental problem, and was siding with the woman who had just degraded my entire existence. She literally just insulted my education and my career, I said, my voice rising slightly despite my absolute best efforts to stay calm. Julian held up a hand to silence me. Please stop yelling, Maya. You are going to make my colleagues hear you. Just go home, you are exhausted from your shift, and you are not thinking clearly. Vivienne smiled a triumphant, razor-sharp smile. She opened her glittering designer clutch, pulled out a crisp $50 bill, and held it out to me as if she were tipping a valet driver. Take this and call an Uber, Vivienne said smoothly. Go back to your little apartment, and let the adults handle the real business tonight. I looked at the money fluttering in her manicured fingers, and looked at Julian, the man I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, who was now awkwardly taking a sip of his champagne and avoiding my gaze. He had his medication, and had his toxic mother, he had his precious high society gala, and did not need me. I did not take the money or scream, cry, or throw a pathetic fit, and simply looked Julian dead in the eye and saw him for what he was. A weak, spineless fraud hiding behind his mother's designer skirts. I understand, I said quietly. My voice was tasty, stripped of all the warmth and love I had once carried for him. I understand perfectly. I turned around and walked away, and heard the heavy metal door click shut behind me, sealing them back inside their exclusive world of luxury and warmth. I walked through the dark, icy alley, my sneakers crunching against the fresh snow. Every single step I took away from the St. Regis Hotel felt like a massive step toward a new, brutally clear reality. I was done making excuses for them, and was done trying to prove my profound worth to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I got into my car and turned the heater on full blast, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The clock on my dashboard read 10:15 p.m. I had 45 minutes before my next emergency room shift began, and took a deep breath, wiped a single stray tear that had escaped down my freezing cheek, and put the car in drive. I was a trauma nurse, and had real lives to save, what neither Julian nor Vivian knew, as they returned to their expensive champagne and their wealthy donors, was that the universe has a very specific, terrifying way of delivering absolute karma. They thought they had discarded me for the night, and thought they had put the working-class nurse in her place. But the night was far from over, and very soon, the exact elite society they worshipped would come crashing violently through the double doors of my emergency room, begging for the exact skills they had just mocked. I pulled away from the loading zone, but the holiday traffic had the surrounding streets gridlocked. Rather than burning gas in a massive standstill, I decided to take a dark shortcut through the narrow service alley, connecting the luxury hotel to the main boulevard. The cold was still biting through my car heater, chilling me straight to the bone. As my headlights swept across the rough brick exterior of the building, the bright beams caught a figure, slumped against the freezing wall. It was an older man in a plain, slightly worn suit. He was clutching his chest tightly, his shoulders heaving with ragged, uneven breaths. In a neighborhood where luxury cars and expensive tailored coats were the absolute norm, he looked out of place, almost invisible in the dark shadows. But my rigorous medical training did not care about aesthetics, wealth, or zip codes. I slammed my car into park, threw on my hazard lights, and grabbed the heavy trauma first aid kit I always kept in the passenger seat. The freezing wind whipped my hair across my face as I sprinted over to him. "Sir, I am a nurse," I said clearly, keeping my voice calm but authoritative. "I am going to help you right now, can you hear me?" He nodded weakly, his eyes wide with the primal, terrifying panic that always comes from severe air hunger. His skin was dangerously pale, looking ashen, and his lips carried a faint, terrifying bluish tint. I pressed 2 fingers against his carotid artery. His pulse was thready and racing, skipping beats in a dangerous, erratic rhythm. "Look right at me," I instructed, placing one hand flat on his chest and the other on his back. "You are hyperventilating, which is making the terrible strain on your heart much worse. I need you to match my breathing exactly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Nice and slow." I exaggerated my own breathing, forcing him to lock eyes with me and mirror the steady, life-saving rhythm. 1, 2, 3, inhale, 1, 2, 3, exhale. For 2 agonizing minutes, we stood together in the freezing alley. Gradually, the frantic heaving of his chest began to slow down. The natural color slowly returned to his face. I wrapped my heavy winter coat around his trembling shoulders, ignoring the bitter bite of the wind against my own thin scrub top. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice deep and commanding. He leaned back against the brick wall, wiping a sheen of cold sweat from his forehead. I thought I was done for a moment there. My vital medication is inside, but the massive crowd was just too much. "I simply needed some fresh air." "You need a lot more than air," I told him firmly, checking his pulse one more time. It was stabilizing, but the underlying dangerous irregularity remained. "You are experiencing a significant cardiac event. I am calling an ambulance right now to take you to Atlanta General." "No ambulance," he said quickly, raising a hand with surprising authority to stop me. "I have a private driver waiting on the next street over. He can take me safely. I swear I will go straight to the hospital." I hesitated, but he was alert, oriented, and his breathing had returned to normal. I could not legally force him into an ambulance against his will, and helped him stand, keeping a firm, supportive grip on his arm to ensure he was steady on his feet. "You handled that terrifying situation with remarkable precision," he said, his sharp eyes assessing me, in a way that felt different from Vivian's cruel, judgmental glare. "What do you do for a living?" The bitter, painful sting of my recent encounter with Julian and his toxic mother was still fresh. I looked down at my stained sneakers and my faded hospital scrubs. "I am just a nurse," I replied quietly. The words tasted like bitter ash in my mouth. The older man adjusted the collar of his worn suit. A faint, knowing smile touched the corners of his mouth. "People never respect the oxygen in the room until they start choking." "Young lady," he said quietly, his voice echoing with profound weight. "Never let anyone convince you that you are just anything." He handed me back my winter coat, thanked me sincerely once more, and walked steadily toward the main street. I watched closely until he turned the corner safely, then finally got back into my car. His profound words echoed in my mind, pushing the lingering toxic doubt out of my head. I put the car in gear and drove straight to Atlanta General Hospital to start my shift. The emergency room on Christmas Eve is always a different kind of terrifying war zone. The festive cheer of the holiday seasons stops at the sliding glass doors of the trauma bay. Inside, it is a chaotic, relentless symphony of blaring cardiac monitors, heavy stretchers crashing violently against hallway walls, and the sharp, urgent commands of medical professionals fighting against the clock. I swiped my security badge, grabbed a fresh cup of terrible break-room coffee, and stepped into the absolute madness. There was no extra time to dwell on Julian. There was no time to think about the elite, high society gala happening across town. The very moment my feet hit the cold linoleum floor, I was no longer the unwanted, working-class girlfriend, and was Maya, the charge nurse of Trauma Bay 1, and I owned this entire floor. We got a massive 10-car pileup on Interstate 85. The senior attending physician, Dr. Evans, shouted as I tied my hair back and snapped on a fresh pair of blue latex gloves. "EMS is bringing in 3 criticals right now. ETA is 4 minutes, Maya. I need you on the lead trauma bed." "Copy that," I replied instantly, and moved through the busy bay with practiced, mechanical precision. I primed the IV fluid lines, checked the defibrillator battery levels, and arranged the sterile intubation tray before the automatic doors even opened. In this specific room, social pedigree meant nothing. Your massive trust fund could not stop a hemorrhaging artery. Your exclusive country club membership could not restart a stopped heart. The only single thing that mattered here was clinical skill, blinding speed, and the rare ability to stay ice-cold under immense pressure. The paramedics burst through the double doors, pushing a bloody, battered stretcher. Male 32 years old, unrestrained driver in a violent vehicle rollover. The lead medic rattled off rapidly. Heart rate is racing at 140, blood pressure is tanking fast at 80/40. "He is unresponsive, move him over on 3, I ordered the trauma team firmly. 1, 2, 3, we shifted the broken patient onto the central trauma bed. Dr. Evans moved to the head of the bed to secure the compromised airway, but the patient's jaw was clenched tight in a rigid trauma reflex. "I cannot get the breathing tube in," Dr. Evans said anxiously, heavy sweat beading on his forehead. "He is clamping down hard, pushing 20 milligrams of etomidate and 100 of succinylcholine." I called out clearly, instantly administering the powerful paralytic and sedative medications through the fresh IV line I had just established, and counted the long seconds in my head, watching the overhead monitor closely as the patient's rigid muscles finally relaxed. "You are clear, doctor," I said. Dr. Evans slid the plastic breathing tube in perfectly. I secured it tightly, attached the ventilation bag, and started pumping life-saving oxygen into the man's damaged lungs. Meanwhile, my eyes darted to the portable ultrasound machine screen. Dark fluid was pooling in the patient's abdomen. He was bleeding out internally. "We need to activate the massive transfusion protocol right now," I yelled to the junior nurse standing frozen by the supply cart. "Call the main blood bank. Tell them I need 4 units of O-negative, uncross-matched blood. Stat." For the next 4 exhausting hours, the busy trauma bay was a revolving door of broken bodies and desperate, heroic measures. I stabilized a terrified teenager with a shattered femur, brought a frail grandmother back from severe respiratory failure, and efficiently managed the endless flow of triage patients flooding the crowded waiting room. I barely had time to use the restroom, let alone check my cell phone, and was functioning on pure, unadulterated adrenaline, expertly navigating the chaotic, unpredictable dance of life and death. Around 2 in the morning, the initial rush finally broke. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I leaned against the nurse's station, charting notes on a tablet. My feet ached, my back throbbed, and my scrubs were splattered with iodine and saline. But I felt grounded. This was my true home. The heavy double doors of the emergency room did not just slide open. They burst apart with a violent crash that sent a shockwave through the entire department. Code blue incoming. The frantic shout echoed from the lead paramedic, a burly man named Marcus, who I had worked with 100 times. He was sprinting down the pristine white hallway, his face flushed and dripping with sweat, straddling a moving stretcher while pumping the chest of an unconscious patient. A second paramedic was steering the gurney from the foot of the bed, struggling to navigate the sharp turns of the crowded ER while squeezing an ambu bag to force oxygen into the patient's lungs. "What do we have, Marcus?" I shouted instantly, dropping my charting tablet and sprinting toward Trauma Bay 1. My fatigue vanished completely, replaced by the sharp, familiar surge of pure adrenaline. "Older male mid-60s, Marcus yelled back, his breath ragged between chest compressions. "Massive cardiac arrest, transported from a VIP event at the St. Regis. He collapsed right in the main ballroom. We have got no pulse. He flatlined twice in the rig. I pushed 2 rounds of epinephrine and shocked him once at 200 joules, but we are still in ventricular fibrillation." We swung the stretcher violently into the trauma bay. The bright surgical light snapped on automatically, illuminating the patient's face. I froze for a fraction of a second. It was the man from the alley, Sterling, the man who had been struggling to breathe against the freezing brick wall. The man who told me never to let anyone convince me I was just a nurse. His slightly worn suit had been ripped open by the paramedics to attach the defibrillator pads. His chest was bruised from the aggressive CPR. His face was devoid of color, an ashen gray that signaled death was standing right in the room with us. "Get him on the monitor," I barked, snapping back into reality and shoving my personal recognition aside. Switching out on compressions. 1, 2, 3. I jumped onto the step stool next to the bed, locked my elbows, and threw my entire body weight into Mr. Sterling's chest, taking over the CPR rhythm. The physical exertion was immense, but my focus was absolute. We needed to establish a viable airway and push more life-saving cardiac drugs immediately. But before I could shout my next order to the trauma team, an ear-piercing scream shattered the intense focus of the room. "Do not let her touch him. Get your filthy hands off of him right now." I did not even need to turn my head to recognize that shrill, entitled voice. It was Vivian. She came storming into the emergency room like a hurricane of emerald green silk and diamonds, ignoring the massive red signs restricting access to medical personnel only, and was not alone. Right on her heels was Julian, his custom tuxedo now slightly rumpled, his face pale and slick with panicked sweat. Following closely behind them were Julian's sister Chloe and his slick-talking brother Darren, both decked out in ridiculous high society evening wear that looked absurd against the sterile, blood-stained backdrop of a level 1 trauma center. "Security," I yelled over my shoulder, maintaining my relentless CPR compressions. "Get these unauthorized people out of my trauma bay right now." "Do you know who we are?" Darren shouted, shoving a frantic triage nurse out of his way as he marched toward the glass doors of our room. He pointed an aggressive finger at the medical staff. "We are top-tier donors to this hospital network. You work for us. And that man on the table is our most important investor. You better treat him like royalty." Chloe was sobbing hysterically, clutching her designer ball gown and staggering around the hallway as if she were the one having a medical emergency. "He cannot die," she wailed, leaning against Julian. "If he dies tonight, the entire fund collapses." We will lose the house, Julian. We will lose everything. Julian looked terrified, not for the man dying on the table, but for his own precarious financial future. He grabbed his mother's arm, trying to pull her back, but Vivian violently shook him off. She marched right up to the glass partition of Trauma Bay 1 and began pounding her diamond-ringed fists against the glass. I demand to speak to the chief of cardiology immediately. Vivian shrieked, her voice echoing down the entire corridor and disturbing dozens of other sick patients. I want the head of the department down here, this very second. I refuse to let your regular incompetent staff handle this. We need the best doctor in this city, not some glorified clinic workers. Dr. Evans, the attending physician who had just finished intubating our previous car crash victim, rushed into the bay. He looked bewildered by the sudden influx of screaming socialites. "Ma'am, you need to step back immediately," Dr. Evans ordered, moving to block Vivian from entering the sterile field. "We are running a code blue. Your presence is endangering this patient's life. Endangering his life." Vivian scoffed loudly, her face twisting into an ugly mask of pure elitist rage. She pointed a sharp, manicured fingernail at me. I was still standing on the stool, sweat dripping down my neck as I pumped Mr. Sterling's chest. "You are the ones endangering his life. You have a common, uneducated street nurse performing CPR on a billionaire. She is a nobody. I literally just fired her from my gala an hour ago because she lacks the basic pedigree to pour champagne, and now you are letting her practice medicine on the primary investor of our wealth management fund." Darren pushed his way forward, backing up his mother's toxic demands. He flashed a glossy black business card at Dr. Evans, as if it were some kind of diplomatic immunity badge. "Listen to me very closely," Darren sneered, his slick financial broker persona slipping to reveal raw, desperate panic. "That man on the stretcher is holding $300 million of our family's capital in his accounts. If his heart stops beating, our entire corporate structure goes into freefall by tomorrow morning. We will be bankrupt, so you better get that little scrub-wearing amateur off his chest and get a real doctor in here right now. Or I will personally sue this hospital into the ground." I continued my compressions, ignoring the burning ache in my shoulders. 1, 2, 3, 4. My eyes stayed locked on the cardiac monitor. The jagged, chaotic lines of ventricular fibrillation danced across the screen. He was still dying, and these people, these horrible, greedy, superficial monsters, did not care about him as a human being. They only saw a walking bank account. "Julian." Vivian zeek-zeeked, turning to her son, who was cowering near the nurse's station. "Do something, throw your weight around. Tell them who your father was. Make them listen." Julian stepped forward hesitantly. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading, as if expecting me to suddenly submit to his mother's insane demands just because we used to share an apartment. "Maya, please," Julian begged, his voice cracking with pathetic weakness. "Just step away from the table. Let the real doctors handle this. You do not understand how much money is at stake here. Mr. Sterling is our golden goose. If you mess this up, you ruin my entire family." The sheer audacity of his request made my blood boil over. He wanted me to step away and let a man die just to protect their fraudulent wealth. "I need a pulse check," I shouted to Dr. Evans, ignoring Julian's pathetic whining. I stopped compressions for 3 seconds. The monitor flatlined. A solid, terrifying continuous beep filled the room. A systole. He had lost all electrical activity in his heart. "No pulse," Dr. Evans confirmed grimly. "Resume compressions. Charge the paddles to 300. Push another milligram of epi." I ordered. "No, no, no!" Chloe shrieked from the hallway, dramatically dropping to her knees on the linoleum floor. "The accounts are going to freeze, Darren. The offshore accounts are going to freeze if he is declared dead." "Shut up, Chloe," Darren snapped viciously, his sophisticated veneer shattered. "Keep pumping until the bank opens on Monday morning. Keep pumping until the bank opens on Monday morning." Darren's horrific words hung in the sterile air, a sickening testament to the absolute moral bankruptcy of Julian's family. but I had no time to process their unfathomable greed. Suddenly, the overhead intercom blared to life with a blaring priority page. Dr. Evans, stat to operating room 3, massive internal hemorrhage. Dr. Evans, stat to OR 3. The teenage car crash victim we had stabilized just minutes prior was crashing upstairs. And Dr. Evans was the only attending trauma surgeon available in the entire hospital tonight. Dr. Evans looked torn, his hands hovering over the sterile equipment cart, his eyes darting between the flatlining billionaire on our table and the flashing red emergency light on the wall. He was trapped. If he stayed here, the teenager upstairs would bleed to death on the operating table. If he left, Mr. Sterling was in the hands of the nursing staff and a terrified first-year resident. "Go," I roared, locking my elbows and throwing my entire upper body weight into another cycle of deep, bone-crushing chest compressions. "I have this code, go save the kid." Dr. Evans bolted from the room without a second glance, leaving a wide-eyed, trembling first-year resident, Dr. Singh, standing frozen near the head of the bed. Mr. Sterling's life was now in my hands. The elite family, clustered in the corner of the trauma bay, escalated their screams into a deafening, useless cacophony of panic. "Charge the defibrillator to 200 joules." I barked to the junior nurse, sweat pouring down my forehead and stinging my eyes. "Charging," she replied, hitting the bright yellow button on the machine. But instead of the familiar high-pitched whine of the capacitors loading, a harsh, grating error tone sounded. The screen flashed a bright red warning symbol. "It is giving a fault code." The junior nurse yelled, her voice pitching up with rising panic. "The internal battery is dead, and the wall outlet cord is frayed. The defibrillator is malfunctioning. It will not hold a charge. Swap the cables." I ordered, my voice cutting through the noise with absolute, unwavering authority. "Do not panic. If the primary unit is dead, grab the backup unit from Bay 2 immediately." "Go," she sprinted out of the room. I did not miss a single beat of my compressions. My shoulders burned with the intense buildup of lactic acid, and my lower back screamed in protest, but I was in my element. This was my domain, Sing. I shouted, snapping the frozen resident out of his terrified stupor. "Stop staring at the flatline and manage the airway. Bag him one breath every 6 seconds. Do not hyperventilate him. I need an intra-osseous line established in his right tibia immediately. We cannot wait for peripheral IV access." Dr. Singh blinked hard, nodded rapidly, and finally sprang into action, grabbing the IO drill to establish a direct line into the bone marrow for rapid medication delivery. "Push 1 milligram of epinephrine." I commanded the medication nurse, standing to my left. "Follow it with 300 milligrams of amiodarone. Flush the lines wide open. We need to jumpstart this heart right now." Vivian could no longer contain her unhinged panic over her precious wealth management fund. Seeing the defibrillator fail, and watching the attending physician run out of the room, had shattered her manicured composure. She breached the invisible sterile barrier of the trauma bay, her massive emerald green ball gown knocking over a tray of sterile surgical instruments. The metal tools clattered onto the bloody linoleum floor. "What is happening?" Vivian shrieked, her face twisted into an ugly mask of pure terror and elitist rage. "Why did that doctor leave? Why is the machine broken? Do something. Ma'am, you cannot be in this zone." The triage nurse pleaded, moving to physically block Vivian from reaching the trauma bed. Vivian violently shoved the triage nurse aside with surprising force. She lunged toward the head of the bed, her eyes wide and manic, and reached out and grabbed my forearm just as I was pushing down for another deep compression. Her sharp manicured fingernails dug painfully through my thin scrub top and into my skin. "Get your filthy hands off of him." Vivian screamed at the top of her lungs, spittle flying from her lips. "You are just a nurse. You do not know what you are doing. You are going to kill him and ruin my entire family. Get away from him right now." I forcefully ripped my arm out of her frantic grasp without breaking my CPR rhythm for even a fraction of a second. My eyes locked onto hers, and all the suppressed anger, grit, and working-class resilience I had built over my entire life flared in my gaze, and did not back down or cower. I stared right through her superficial, wealthy facade and saw nothing but an empty, desperate woman. "Security!" I roared, my voice booming with such overwhelming authority that it startled even the medical staff. Two large, muscular hospital security guards instantly stepped through the sliding glass doors. "Get these people out of my trauma bay right this second," I commanded, pointing a blood-stained, gloved finger at Vivian and then at Julian, who was still cowering near the sink. "I do not care who they are. I do not care how much money is in their bank accounts. In here I am the law, get them out now." The security guards did not hesitate. The larger guard grabbed Vivian by the arms of her excessive gown, ignoring her outraged shrieks about lawsuits and board members. The second guard grabbed Julian by the collar of his custom tuxedo, forcibly marching him backward into the hallway. "Take your hands off my mother." Julian stammered weakly, stumbling over his polished dress shoes as the guard shoved him out the door. "You cannot treat us like this." "I can and I will," I shouted back as the heavy glass doors finally slid shut, sealing the elite family outside in the hallway where they belonged. With the toxic distraction finally removed, the temperature in the room seemed to instantly drop, replaced by an intense laser-focused clinical clarity. The junior nurse sprinted back into the room, hauling the heavy backup defibrillator. "Pads are on. Backup unit is online and charging," she yelled, slapping the adhesive pads onto Mr. Sterling's bare, bruised chest. "Clear," I ordered, pulling my hands away from his sternum and taking a massive step back. "Everyone clear the bed, delivering now," the junior nurse announced. The heavy electrical current ripped through Mr. Sterling's body, causing his back to arch sharply off the trauma mattress before slamming back down against the sheets. I immediately jumped back onto the step stool and resumed my aggressive, flawless chest compressions. "Push another milligram of epi," I barked, staring intently at the cardiac monitor. Come on, fight back, do not let these people win." I pumped hard and fast, the rhythmic squeak of the bed frame serving as a metronome for survival. 10 seconds passed, then 20. "Hold compressions," I ordered, pausing mid-thrust and pressing my fingers against the side of his neck. The entire trauma room held its collective breath. The chaotic, jagged lines of ventricular fibrillations on the digital screen suddenly vanished. For 2 agonizing seconds there was a flatline, then a small, beautiful electrical spike appeared on the green grid. Then another, and another. The spikes formed a steady rhythmic mountain range across the screen. I pressed harder against his carotid artery, beneath my fingertips. I felt it, a pulse. "We have a pulse," I announced loudly. "We have return of spontaneous circulation. Blood pressure is 85/55 and climbing. Heart rate is 92. Doctor," Singh let out a loud, relieved cheer, slumping against the supply cart. I grabbed my stethoscope and listened closely to his chest, confirming the steady, mechanical beating of his heart, and had pulled him back from the absolute brink. "Central line," I instructed the team, my voice dropping back to a calm, measured, professional tone. "Let us get him prepped for immediate transport to the cardiac catheterization lab. He needs a stent, but he is stable for now. Excellent work, everyone." I stepped down from the stool, my entire body trembling with exhaustion and post-adrenaline shakes. I stripped off my bloody gloves and threw them into the biohazard bin. Through the glass doors of the trauma bay, I could see Vivian, Julian, Chloe, and Darren pressing their faces against the glass, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had expected me to fail, and had expected the working-class girl to crumble under the immense pressure. Instead, they had just watched me orchestrate a medical miracle. I walked over to the glass door, looking through the transparent barrier at Julian. His custom tuxedo was ruined, his hair was a mess, and his face was a portrait of absolute humiliation and shock. I did not smile or gloat, and simply gave him a look of profound, unwavering disgust, turned my back on his entire toxic family, and went back to charting my patient's vital signs. The morning sun breached the Atlanta skyline, casting long, harsh shadows across the hospital parking garage. My 12-hour shift was finally over, but my physical body felt like it had been run over by a massive freight train. As I pulled into the driveway of the upscale midtown apartment Julian and I shared, a heavy knot of pure dread formed deep in my stomach. The luxury sports car Julian leased was parked haphazardly in his designated spot. He was home. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, dropping my heavy work bag onto the glass entryway console. I expected him to be asleep. Instead, Julian was pacing the entire length of our spacious, modern living room. He was still wearing the dark trousers and white dress shirt from his ruined tuxedo, and looked disheveled, frantic, and furious. The exact moment he heard the deadbolt click, he spun around and locked his dark eyes onto mine. His gaze was devoid of affection. "Where have you been?" Julian demanded, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. I blinked at him, my extreme physical exhaustion making my mind move a fraction of a second slower than usual. "I just finished my shift, Julian, and was saving lives." "You know where I have been all night." He let out a sharp, mocking laugh that sent a terrible chill down my spine. "Saving lives? Is that what you call it?" Because from where I was standing, it looked a whole lot like you were throwing a pathetic, jealous temper tantrum in the middle of a major medical crisis. I froze in my tracks. "Excuse me. Are you actually serious right now?" I restarted Mr. Sterling's heart. "Your mother was physically assaulting me while I was performing deep chest compressions." Julian closed the distance between us, jabbing a rigid finger in my direction. "Do not you dare put this on my mother. Maya, I saw what happened. You were embarrassed that she rightfully turned you away from the saint. Regis Gala, you were bitter because you did not have a proper invitation to sit with the real power players of Atlanta. So, when the most important man in our entire financial portfolio arrived in your emergency room, you saw a golden opportunity. You used a dying man as a prop to enact your petty ghetto revenge against my family." The sheer audacity of his words literally took my breath away. He was rewriting reality right in front of my face and was taking my absolute professional competence and twisting it into a malicious, unhinged narrative. "You are delusional," I said, keeping my voice dangerously low and controlled. "I am the charge nurse of the trauma center. I ran that code because it was my job. Your mother endangered his life by screaming for a cardiologist when he needed immediate manual chest compressions. If I had listened to her uneducated demands, Mr. Sterling would be lying in the morgue right now. And your precious wealth management fund would be bankrupt." Julian scoffed loudly, waving his hand dismissively. "You always have to be the hero, do not you? You always have to prove that the scrappy working-class girl is somehow smarter than the educated elites. You humiliated my mother in front of the hospital administrators. You had hospital security drag her out of the room like she was some common criminal. Do you have any idea how that looks? Do you have any idea how much permanent damage you did to our family aesthetic?" Aesthetic, that ridiculous word again. They were obsessed with the surface, hollow and empty on the inside. "This is why my mother did not want you at the gala, Maya," Julian continued viciously. "You lack restraint and lack class. You lack the basic understanding of how our world operates. And are an unhinged, jealous woman who cannot handle being around people with actual pedigree." I looked at him with absolute dead shark-like eyes. "I am not apologizing to you or your mother, Julian. I did my job perfectly." His face contorted instantly into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His voice dropped to a sinister, threatening whisper. "You listen to me very carefully, Maya. My family is dealing with a massive financial crisis this morning. Darren and I are frantically trying to keep our major investors from jumping ship now that Mr. Sterling is incapacitated in the ICU. When my mother demands an apology from you for manhandling her, you are going to get on your knees and beg for her forgiveness. Or I swear to God, I will personally call the hospital board and have your nursing license permanently revoked for gross insubordination." He thought his threats would break me and thought the prospect of losing my career and his wealthy family would send me into a spiral of submission. But he was severely mistaken. I simply nodded slowly, absorbing his toxic manipulation, and walked straight into the bedroom and packed a single, large suitcase with all of my essential belongings. I did not shed a single tear or yell, and walked back into the living room, ignoring his arrogant stance, and handed him the diamond engagement ring he had proposed with. "Consider the wedding cancelled, Julian," I stated, dropping the cold metal into his palm. "And consider yourself lucky that I am walking out that door, instead of calling the police to report your mother for criminal assault." I left the apartment without looking back, but the story did not end there. While Julian and his toxic family believed they had excised the working-class problem from their pristine lives, they had failed to account for one massive, unpredictable variable. Mr. Sterling woke up. 3 days after the incident, I was called into the VIP recovery wing. Mr. Sterling was sitting up in his hospital bed, looking significantly better, reviewing a stack of complex financial documents on a tablet. When I walked into the room to check his vitals, he set the tablet aside and looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "The nurse from the freezing alley," Mr. Sterling said, his deep voice carrying a tone of absolute respect. "My personal security team reviewed the hospital security footage of my Code Blue. They showed me how Vivian and her arrogant sons behaved while I was dying on your table, and showed me how you protected my life." I checked his IV drip, keeping my professional demeanor intact. "I was simply doing my job, Mr. Sterling." "Your job is saving lives," Mr. Sterling replied, leaning back against his pillows. "My job is recognizing exceptional character and destroying fraudulent investments." While I was recovering, I had my personal forensic accounting team run a deep, unannounced audit on the Sterling Wealth Management Fund. He handed me the glowing tablet. "It turns out, Vivian and Julian have not been managing my money at all. They have been running a massive, illegal embezzlement ring, using my capital to fund their luxury lifestyle while hiding the massive losses in offshore shell companies, and are bankrupt, Maya, and they have been forging federal documents to cover their tracks." I looked down at the screen, scanning the devastating financial data. The absolute realization of their monumental fraud washed over me. Julian had not been frantic about Mr. Sterling's health. He had been utterly terrified that a sudden death would trigger an automatic federal audit of the accounts, instantly exposing their crimes. "I am pulling all $300 million of my capital out of their firm tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Mr. Sterling stated, his voice ringing with cold, absolute authority. "The immediate withdrawal will trigger a catastrophic margin call. Their entire fraudulent empire will violently collapse by noon. And I want you to be the one to hand them the formal liquidation notice." The following is a certified, unredacted copy of the forensic audit logs, detailing Julian's systematic embezzlement of the Wealth Management Fund. December 2010, 2023 time, 09 a.m. violation. Dare's margin call, covered illegally using $446. 305, from Zenith Offshore Client Funds Stalis. Verified fraud, federal flag activated. 1002 day, January 8, 2024, time 2:20 p.m. violation. Asset liquidation protocol initiated prematurely. Routing $441 336 to Sterling Logistics. Verified fraud, federal flag activated. 1003 day T. January 1, 2024 time, 11:05 a.m. violation. Forged signature detected on high-risk collateral loan for $618. 495 via Oasis Ventures, Stalis. Verified fraud, federal flag activated. ID 1004 date. December 10, 2023 time. 03:50 p.m. violation, phantom legal fees billed at $6.59. 00 and wired to Oasis Ventures offshore account. Stalus. Verified fraud, federal flag activated. 1005 day, January 11, 2024 time, 08:10 a.m. violation. Asset liquidation protocol initiated prematurely. Routing 796 Os 839 to Oasis Ventures. Stoat. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, 1006. January 3, 2024 time, 10 violation. Vivian's personal luxury expenditure, disguised as corporate retreat costing $533. 9 Ocean. Consulting, Stultus. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, 1007 Dadat. January 7, 2024 time. 2:30 p.m. Violation, phantom legal fees billed at 6 Hayden 495. 00 and wired to Blue Ocean Consulting offshore account. Stillitz. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, 1008. December 23, 2023 time. 55 p.m. Violation, unauthorized transfer of 736 and 37. 00 from Sterling Escrow to Meridian Group Shell account. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, ID 1009 today, December 24, 2023 time. 03:45 p.m. Violation, forged signature detected on high-risk collateral loan for $219. 917, via Blue Ocean Consulting, Stilos. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, any 1010 date. December 7, 2023 times 03:10 p.m. Violation, compliance warning overridden by Julian's executive key for $441. 336, Azure to Apex Horizon Stult. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, UN-111, January 12, 2024 time. 10:55 a.m. Violation. Vivian's personal luxury expenditure disguised as corporate retreat costing $739. 702. 0 via Apex Horizon Stults. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, ERI 1012 day. December 9, 2023 time, 10:45 a.m. Violation. Chloe's designer wardrobe classified as corporate marketing expense totaling $618. 4 via Zenith Offshore Stalis. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, 1013. December 4, 2023 time, 11:10 a.m. Violation. Falsified medical equipment depreciations logged for $932. 930. Under Pinnacle Holdings Ledger, Stalis. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, a 1014 date. December 16, 2023 time, 08:10 a.m. Violation. Forged signature detected on high-risk collateral loan for $278. 291. Via Oasis Ventures Stellus. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, a 1015 date. January 7, 2020 violation. Audit trail scrubbed for 521,237 tis. 00 capital flight directed at Oasis Ventures, Stellos. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, RD 1016. December 12, 2023 time, 10:05 violation. Compliant vote written by Julian's executive key for $796. 839. To Blues Ocean Consulting, Stellus. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, ERI 1017 date. December 9, 2023 time, 01:45 p.m. Violation. Forged signature detected on high-risk collateral loan for $784. 129. Via Sterling Logistics. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, Indrazi 1018, date. December 1, 2023 time, 10 p.m. Phantom legal fees billed at $652,958. 00 and wired to Blue Ocean Consulting offshore account. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, 1019 date. December 9, 2023 time, 02. Phantom legal fees billed at $441 336s. 00 and wired to Apex Horizon offshore account. Verified fraud, federal flag activated. December 23, 2023 time, 01:25 p.m. Violation. Audit trail scrubbed for $533. 957. Capital flight directed at Oasis Ventures. Verified fraud, federal flag activated. 1021, December 20, 2023 time 3. 30 p.m. Violation, asset liquidation protocol initiated prematurely. Routing 864-326. To Zenith Offshore. Federal flag activated, Maiji, 1022 date. December 7, 2023 time, 02:10 p.m. Violation. Vivian's personal luxury expenditure disguised as corporate retreat costing $219. 900 via Apex Horizon Stos. Verified fraud, federal flag activated, 1023 date. December 13, 2023 time. 03:45 p.m. violation. Falsified medical equipment depreciation logged for $989. 908. Under Meridian Group Ledger. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. RI 1024. December 7, 2023 time. 09. Personal luxury expenditure, disguised as corporate retreat costing $760. 8.65. 0 via Meridian Group. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. Entry 1025 date. January 14, 2024 time. 11:05 a.m. violation. Phantom legal fees billed at $207,791. 0 and wired to Blue Ocean Consulting offshore account. Stella. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. IRI 26 date. December 14, 2023 time. 09:45 a.m. violation. Forged signature detected on high-risk collateral loan for $940. 169. Via Meridian Group Steltis. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. Tay 27 date Tay. December 6, 2023 time. A PM violation. Darren's margin call covered illegally using $353. 785. From Sterling Logistics Client Funds. Stellus. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. December 22, 2023 time. 10:20 a.m. violation. Phantom legal fees billed at $533. 957. And wired to Pinnacle Holdings offshore account. Stay loose. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. 10:29. January 12, 2024 time. 03. 25 p.m. violation. Chloe's designer wardrobe classified as corporate marketing expense totaling $533. 957. Via Sterling Logistics. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. Already 10:30 date. December 2, 2023 time. 03:30 p.m. Forged signature detected on high-risk collateral loan for $251. 269. Via Zenith Offshore, Stellis. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. May 1031 date. December 6, 2023 time. 05 p.m. violation. Asset liquidation protocol initiated prematurely. Routing 739-702 to Zenith Offshores. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. And 1032 date. January 13, 2024 time. 2:45 p.m. violation. Falsified medical equipment depreciation logged for $297. Tutor 44. 0 under Apex Horizon Ledger. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. I-1033 8 December 5, 2023 time. Audit trail. Scrubbed for $420. 677. 00 Capital flight directed at Blue Ocean Consulting. Stalatus. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated in 34 date. December 14, 2023 time. 01. 25 p.m. violation. Darren's margin call covered illegally using $930. 0 Pinnacle Holdings Client Funds stall. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. December 6, 2023 time. 02:40 p.m. violation. Asset liquidation protocol initiated prematurely. Routing 751 Jules, Hun 21, to Pinnacle Holdings. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. RE 1036 date. January 3, 2024 time. 08:45 a.m. violation. Compliance warning overridden by Jillian's executive key for $784. Wonder 0 to Meridian Group, Stalos. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. AG 1037. January 12, 2024 time. 01:25 p.m. violations. Unauthorized transfer of 810,641. 0 from Sverthizing escrow to Sterling Logistics shell account. Stalus. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. 1038. December 2, 2023 time. 25 p.m. violation. Chloe's designer wardrobe classified as corporate marketing expense totaling $353. 7.85. 00 via Blue Ocean Consulting. Verified federal flag activated. I-1039 date. December 9, 2023 time. 09:10 a.m. violation. Compliance warning overridden by Julian's executive key for $278. 291. To Blue Ocean Consulting Stalus. Verified fraud. Federal flag activated. I stood in the massive mahogany-paneled boardroom of the Sterling Wealth Management firm the very next morning. Julian, Vivian, Darren, and Chloe were all seated around the expansive glass table, sipping expensive espresso and discussing their upcoming luxury vacations, oblivious to the impending doom. When the heavy wooden doors swung open, their arrogant laughter ceased entirely. I walked into the room flanked by Mr. Sterling's lead corporate attorney and two federal agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I was not wearing faded hospital scrubs, and was wearing a sharp, impeccably tailored black suit, carrying a thick leather binder containing the undeniable proof of their financial annihilation. "Maya?" Julian stammered, his face instantly draining of all color. He stood up from his leather chair, looking frantically between me and the federal agents. "What on earth are you doing here? Security is supposed to keep unauthorized personnel out of this building." "I am not unauthorized, Julian," I replied, my voice echoing with icy, unyielding authority. "I am here acting as the legally appointed proxy for your primary investor, Mr. Sterling." Vivian scoffed loudly, slamming her espresso cup down on the table. "This is ridiculous. Mr. Sterling is in the ICU. He would never appoint a pathetic street nurse as his corporate proxy. Darren, call security and have this delusional woman removed immediately." I did not flinch or back down, and walked to the head of the table and forcefully dropped the heavy leather binder in front of Julian. The loud, resounding smack of the binder hitting the glass shattered their arrogant illusions. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Mr. Sterling formally initiated a complete and total withdrawal of all $300 million of his capital from your management fund, I announced, looking into Julian's terrified eyes. Furthermore, my forensic audit team has submitted undeniable proof of massive wire fraud, illegal offshore fee embezzlement, and gross financial mismanagement to the federal authorities. Darren lunged forward, grabbing the binder and flipping frantically through the pages. The color vanished from his face as he realized every single one of their illegal shell companies. Forged signatures and fraudulent ledger entries had been exposed. "This is impossible," Darren whispered, his hands trembling violently. "How did you get access to these restricted servers?" "You never respect the oxygen in the room until you start choking," I stated, quoting Mr. Sterling's profound words. "You spent years tearing me down, insulting my education, and treating me like an inferior piece of trash, and were so obsessed with aesthetics and pedigree that you failed to realize I am far smarter, far more resilient, and far more capable than you will ever be." The federal agents stepped forward, producing official warrants for the immediate seizure of all corporate assets. "Julian Sterling, Vivian Sterling, you are both under arrest for federal wire fraud and conspiracy to commit embezzlement," the lead agent boomed, unholstering a pair of steel handcuffs. Chloe began shrieking hysterically, dropping to her knees on the expensive imported carpet, screaming about losing her designer wardrobe. Vivian collapsed into her chair, clutching her chest, paralyzed by the horrifying reality that her elite social standing had just been violently incinerated. She was no longer the matriarch of Atlanta high society. She was a destitute criminal facing decades in a federal penitentiary. Julian was handcuffed and physically dragged away from the boardroom table. As the federal agents led him toward the door, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with tears of raw, pathetic desperation. He finally realized that the very woman he's had discarded and gaslit in the freezing cold was the exact architect of his absolute destruction. I did not offer him a single ounce of pity or shed a tear, and simply turned my back, picked up my leather binder, and walked out of the skyscraper, breathing the crisp, clean air of my own hard-won freedom. The greatest takeaway from my journey is that true power does not lie in matching the volume of your abusers, but in the quiet, calculated execution of your boundaries. When dealing with toxic family dynamics, the natural instinct is to scream or beg for respect. But manipulators thrive on emotional chaos. The ultimate revenge is never a screaming match. It is absolute, undeniable success built on a foundation of self-worth and financial independence. Let them underestimate you, Work in absolute silence, build your intellect, secure your financial independence, and construct your own empire brick by brick. Let your massive undeniable success be the gavel that silences their disrespect forever. Have you ever had to break free from a toxic environment? Share your journey in the comments below. Like and subscribe to join this community of survivors. I will see you in the next chapter.